Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to be talking to Lin Thompson about The House That Whispers. Welcome, Lin.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, what a pleasure. This book is so much fun. It's such a love story to the family. Can you give us an idea of what it's about? Set us up with it.
Yeah, The House That Whispers is about an 11-year-old trans kid named Simon as he and his two sisters hunt for ghosts in their grandmother's haunted house. But I always describe it as their hunt for ghosts ends up turning up more feelings and family secrets than they went in planning for.
I think that's one of the things that I loved about it. It really is a love story to the family, and it's about a love story to each other as siblings as well. And we start out with Simon in Simon's voice. Simon already knows who he is. And he understands, his dynamic in the family. And then he has a lot of emotion about how to share that.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I was just going to ask, can you give us some sort of like an emotional background to that? Because I thought it was dealt with so well, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it was definitely, I kind of had a sense of the first thing I kind of knew about this book was that I wanted Simon to sort of know who he was going in, even if no one else in his life knew. And so it was really important to me to be able to, have him say, like, my name is Simon, and he, him pronouns are what feel right for me. And then throughout the book for him to just be able to, even when that's not what the other characters are using, that he can just change it for the reader so that we as the reader get to know him this way. But yeah, sort of when I wrote the first draft of this in kind of a whirlwind. And it was just such a different experience from writing my first book where I had years and years to work on it. This one was like a few months and I needed to turn in a draft. And so it was honestly, my editor was kind of able to sort through that and was like, it seems like Simon is dealing with a lot of changes in his life. And that what's kind of coming out is he's trying to control the pieces of it that he can. And I was like, oh, that's what I wrote the book about. So that was so helpful to kind of have an outside voice be able to like articulate something I hadn't fully realized I was kind of putting in with this character. But definitely, yeah, I think Simon kind of goes into the book feeling like because there are so many changes happening in his family that he doesn't want to add this one more thing onto that of kind of coming out as trans to his family. But one of the things that I was really interested in exploring was kind of, obviously no one needs to come out at any time when they're not ready. And I wanted to kind of make sure that it's clear as well, right, that is a very personal decision and there's no right or wrong answer. But there also, there is stress from not being out and from not being able to have anybody who you're open with. And so yeah, I think that kind of throughout I was kind of exploring some of that stress and some of the ways that kind of builds and is really difficult.
I think also, as all teenagers, no matter where they are, their body begins to change and their emotions begin to change. And then you have three siblings here who are basically good kids. And I mean that as a nice compliment because they're a unit of themselves. And that's something we see fairly early on in the book, that they actually do get along. And Simon's older sister, Talia, is beginning to sort of branch out on her own and do her own things. And you see that part of Simon that's like, wait, where are you going? Come back. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a true evolution. I mean, that's what we all do. We go our own way, but they come back collectively time and time again in the book, which is so lovely. And they go to stay with their Nanaleen because the parents are going through some things of their own. Tell us about Nanaleen. She was so fun.
Yeah, so Nanaleen is the kid's grandmother, and lives in this big old farmhouse that I'm trying to. I think it's been in the family for several generations, and so it kind of has all of this family history baked into it. But yeah, it was really fun, kind of getting to explore her as a character and her as kind of this like, because she's really the basically the only adult who is there throughout the story, for more than a few scenes. So she was kind of the one like adult voice, um, influencing them throughout. And for the rest of it, it really is kind of the siblings working through things and kind of playing off of each other. But it was really interesting to kind of get to explore like what's her role here, and kind of she knows that the kids are obviously are going through a hard time with their parents going through a hard time, and that's going to affect them. And so it was fun, not fun exactly, but interesting to kind of think about like, okay, how is she navigating this, how is she trying to support them, while also she is getting older and is starting to have some memory issues, and Simon is starting to note these things kind of for the first time as well, that she's not the same as she always used to be as well.
One of the things that I notice in Simon's evolution is Simon wants to come into his own. And of course, he has a family that loves him, and he knows that already, which is a nice thing. So he's not battling against the enemy, the family. So he has a loving and kind family. And at several points during the book, Simon clearly says he understands that his family will love him. And he's sort of getting to his place. But then as he sees himself changing, he does see his parents having issues at home. He sees his grandmother who is having memory issues, and he's trying to fix it. And it warmed and broke my heart at the same time, because, children often do that. It's, it's part of our evolution. We want to fix things. You grew up in Eastern Kentucky, is that correct?
Western Kentucky,
Oh,
actually.
Western. Sorry. Is there an Eastern and a Western? Just joking. Did you have a big old farmhouse that a grandmother lived in as well, or was that a creation of yours?
Definitely the house was a creation.
Okay.
My grandparents on my dad's side lived in my hometown, and we spent a lot of time over at their house. And they did. It's definitely not the house that's in the story, and it's not that old. But it was like my grandfather built it himself. He always says he did everything except the masonry and the plumbing, because he was an electrician, so he even did all the electricity. So I didn't pull anything literally from that, but I definitely was kind of thinking about that and thinking about my maternal grandparents' house, where actually so in Simon's family's home, then there's the room that they refer to as like the dormitory, or the sisters' dormitory, because that's kind of where the kids all stay when they're there, and have for several generations. Then it's kind of had several people using that as the bedroom. And that actually was a detail I pulled from my mom's grave, from my mom's parents.
I like that.
So yeah, so I was kind of pulling different pieces, while also the house itself being a entirely fictitious creation.
Well, and it is The House That Whispers. That's the title of the book. And that's one thing that you've woven in, is the family history. So we learn about Bree, who is a great aunt. Is that right? I think
so,
that's
yeah.
right. And we learn about the fact that Bree disappears at some point, through family photos. And we have, I think in real life, we have some of that as well. Tell us a little bit about Bree and where she goes.
Yeah, so Bree is their grandmother Nanaleen's oldest sister, who, so Simon has kind of heard of her before, but doesn't know much about her, and no one has really talked about her very much. And so slowly then he and his sisters are kind of piecing together her past, and kind of the story of her running away when she was pretty young, and they kind of slowly realized that she was queer as well, that she was probably a lesbian, and it's kind of this family story that isn't talked about. And I think that in writing this book, I was thinking a lot about kind of those like pieces of the family history that, because they're painful or difficult,
Yes.
or kind of not showing the best sides of people or whatnot, don't get talked about, especially with the kids. But kind of whether or not the adults in that situation are intending to, it creates this taboo, and it can create this kind of sense of something being wrong there, and influence the ways that the kids feel about it, even if they aren't realizing it. So
Yes.
I think I was really interested in kind of like exploring that and shedding light on that, and that there is a downside in not talking about these harder parts of our family histories.
We have this thing that I see a lot that comes up with queer books, is that secrets. And that is one of the things, when we're talking about Brie, it's not that it's necessarily a bad thing. It can be, it may not be, but it's a secret. And
Mhm.
children intuitively feel when something is being withheld from them. And then, of course, that makes them curious. That's how we grow, into adulthood, is curiosity. And I find that family secrets are always the thing that's the most problematic for all characters, whether they're in a book or in real life. So I did enjoy the way that came to fruition. It's nice to see that there was not necessarily a resolution, but there was information that came out finally about Bree and the family, and exactly what went on, and that was really interesting. So great job.
Thank you.
So you're a Lambda Literary Fellow, is that
Mhm.
correct? What
Yes.
is that?
So that is back in 2018, I think. Then I applied for the Lambda Literary, is a queer writers organization, and one of the programs that they do is an annual writing retreat for emerging LGBTQ writers.
Okay.
And so I was incredibly fortunate to apply to that and get in. And so it was kind of a week-long writing retreat out in LA,
Oh, nice.
where I met honestly my writing group still through today. I was literally messaging them earlier this morning about different things. So it has been just like a really Lambda Literary does some really cool programs, and I am forever grateful to them
Oh,
for introducing me to some of my best writing friends.
oh,
So
that's wonderful. And so were they in the program as well?
Yep. So it was a group of, I think, 12 or 13 of us total for kind of I was thrown into the young adult pile, even though
Okay.
technically it was for a middle grade project. But luckily they were flexible. But they have different genres as well. So I think typically there's like a poetry professor, and there's um, an adult fiction.
Mhm.
Sometimes they have screenwriting. So they have different kind of more established queer writers who come in and then kind of lead a workshop, and they have about a dozen participants for each genre. We do readings throughout the week, so it's a really cool opportunity to meet other writers who are kind of at this starting stage, while also getting to meet writers who have been doing this for a long time and have a lot of wisdom to share. So that's my pitch for Lambda Literary.
Well, I will say that I'm so interested, because now I'm going to be doing a little homework on that, because I think that's amazing. It
Yeah, it's a
really
really cool program.
uh, mentorship is so important in both life and and moving our career ahead. So that is absolutely wonderful.
For
This
sure.
book was so fun. I really had such a good time with it. Do you have any social media or websites you'd like to share?
Yes, I am on Instagram at Lin Thompson Books, all one word. And then I am technically on Twitter, although not on Twitter very much, at Lin__Thompson. And then my website is just linthompson.com. So that's where I try to make sure that I keep up with it and post updates, but sometimes fall
Uh,
behind.
that is wonderful. Again, the book is The House That Whispers by Lin Thompson. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you. Hang on for me just a second. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at outwithdan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at Go Out with Dan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.